of breaching the newly introduced Code of Conduct for Public Office Holders. Under intense pressure, Sammy Gyamfi also serves as the National Communications Officer for the NDC, issued a public apology via Facebook on Sunday, the 11th of May, expressing regret over the incident. And he describes it as a personal act of generosity that was never intended for public attention. Nonetheless, sources close to the presidency indicated that the Chief of Staff, Julius Debra, is treating the matter with utmost seriousness owing to its potential political implications and reputational impact on the administration. Nana Agrada has responded to the recent controversy. Here's what she had to say.
And I'm a papa ne kura ne sing. You fear ya me di mamu free. What your mammy full well? I was your muntio, a yam me yano. Now, Mrs. Sammy, ne kura ne sing. What you me fear ya me di mamu? What your mammy full well? Now at least Miss Makuma and Tommy yam. Now, Miss me charge more. A yisika bebre, it's a mammy fool. And a John Noir phone a car to a phone a car. And a Miami Dinechi, just walk for car of the talent, and a Miami Dinechi, and a ja who yin the person, and all kind dollars, say, Miss a thousand was the same. And of the man, so they mammy and a ja, Miss Obapa, Miss Somu.
Yeah, so that is Nana Agrada saying that she only asked for money for fuel, and when Sammy Gyamfi entered his vehicle and gave out the money, she took the money as money to support her in buying fuel for her vehicle. But we are joined now by Jonathan Asante-Otre, who is a political analyst. He's here to help us unpack this issue. Good morning and welcome to the bulletin. Now, looking at this matter in its entirety, here is someone who was saying that, well, I love to give. And here is someone who is as well a public officer. And here is someone who has to deal with the political divide. In your initial assessment of the entire situation, the very big question here is there wrong in this act?
Well, thank you. The name is Dr. Jonathan Asante-Otre,
right.
Mr. Jiman.
Yes.
So the point is that when you look at it from an ethical perspective, anything that you call good or goodness in itself must be good in and by itself. Once it draws some kind of public criticism or ethical issues are raised out of that goodness, then it means that it has not yielded the right result. And so, from an ethical perspective, you will say that everything is wrong about it. Especially when you look at the political terrain. And we are talking about someone who is by far more intelligent than the woman, who is by far more smarter than the woman. In this case, he himself has admitted that he acted indiscretionary. And so, obviously, that his goodness turned something else. And out of kindness, that has yielded the undesired result. And that is how I put it.
Now, beyond what we saw over the weekend, there is, above the political commentary, we are seeing some action from government, the government within which he works with and even speaks for. We are seeing the Chief of Staff summon Sammy Gyamfi to the Jubilee House to have a conversation on this matter. Now, you've married the part where it talks about ethical, it talks about the man's own apology. In the summons, based on your analysis, what do you think would be the key issues that would be evaluated?
Well, in the first place, he ought to have been a little more smarter than what he did. He's really set a very high standard for himself in the public domain, putting the MPP to the wedge and to the sword. Therefore, they will come hard at him for not setting the right ethical standards. So, obviously, my hesitation has been to wait for what the presidency will do, especially owing to the fact that the president has really set a high standard, not only for his appointees, but for all Ghanaians, irrespective of being directly or indirectly appointed by the president. So that is a huge call on the presidency. It is just quite unfortunate. I felt that, look, whatever be the case, people will analyze this from different perspectives, and optically it doesn't look well for his political career as an individual. It does not in any way also bode well for the corporate entity that is called the NDC in government. So the call by the Chief of Staff or the summons by the Chief of Staff is in order. And some kind of reprimand will be in a good stead for the government, and especially the good name of the president. It is very difficult. I can appreciate that. Here is the case. Sammy Gyamfi is a darling boy or the person of the president and all the powers that be. But what he did is not good for the optics, for himself, for the grassroots of the party, for moderate Ghanaians. As for the MPP, they are going to take him to the cleaners, and also the elderly members of the party in government. It does not look well. It does not forebode anything good for them. Therefore, I'm very happy that for the first time, in the first place, he apologized. And so I'm expecting him to purge himself before Ghanaians, to purge himself before the grassroots, and purge himself profusely before the presidency. And whatever sanctions, either limitedly or whatever the president wants to decide, I think that will be the best way to go. It's not as if he's committed any crime, but it is just not good for the political terrain, especially when you did not do that when you were in opposition. Now you find yourself in government, you are doing something of that sort. And especially finding yourself in the public terrain now, and the position that you are occupying, that's a very sensitive position. And that in itself is also not equally good for the optics.
Speaking of reprimanding him to send a message to help make the optics better, many have had some suggest. Some are calling for his immediate dismissal. Some even at a point have suggested that there should be suspension and even for him to even donate his salary to the Mahama Cares Fund. But in your own session, what would be too extreme and what would be just okay?
Well, that is the decision of the appointer. And the only thing that is important is the fact that within the public domain, the president is showing consistency. Because if some groups of your appointees who had not submitted their, asset declaration forfeited 3 months of their salary, I mean, this one, you also spoke about discretion, integrity in, the code of conduct, prescribes opulence. And this in itself is opulence of a sort. Because the woman concerned, the woman in the picture, in the video, is not somebody who is poor. Somebody who is suggesting to us that he gave his building to the NDC to facilitate their work. She is not poor. And I asked a certain question, if indeed the justification was the fact that she gave a certain building to the NDC and that she wants some kind of compensation or even fuel for that matter, she should have written to the national office that she should be compensated for having done A, B, C, and D. And so I do not know the extreme punishment, neither do I know the moderate punishment. What it should be in the public domain is that the president has demonstrated that consistency in terms of either some kind of sanctioning or injunction or reprimand, either publicly or something of that sort. But we also don't have to forget the fact that, look, the young man himself purged himself by apologizing profusely and unconditionally. He never knew that something of that sort was going to be recorded. And it saddens my heart that a smart person like Mr. Sammy Gyamfi will fall victim to this. It's just unfortunate.
Dr. Jonathan Asante, thank you so much for speaking with us on this particular matter. But let's shift focus as well to speak to an anti-graft campaigner and member of the African Union Advisory Board Against Corruption, Adam Senanu. Adam Senanu, good morning once again and welcome to this broadcast. On the same matter concerning Sammy Gyamfi, I spoke to Dr. Jonathan Asante just a while back and he says, well, ethically this is wrong. He is saddened by the fact that Sammy Gyamfi ought to have been smarter. But in the very concluding statement, he says that, well, the president just needs to demonstrate some leadership to ensure that people would see his government as one that doesn't tolerate opulence, because this in itself is opulence. The summons by the chief of staff, in your own assessment, is it in the right direction?
Well, yes, I would say it's in the right direction. I think it's important to note that he has not breached the Constitution, he has not breached any law, nor has he breached any policy. If you look at the Code of Conduct, it's an executive policy which does not even capture this kind of indiscretion. So perhaps at this point they may want to upgrade it and capture things that have to do with bringing the government into disrepute or ostentatious living. But to the extent that it's not reflected at the moment, Mr. Sammy Gyamfi hasn't breached anything. Right. Is there an issue? Yes, there is. What is the issue? When you transition from a private person to a public officer, as Article 1.1 of the Constitution says, whatever you do in the name of the citizens and for the welfare of the people. And it's to that extent that he needed to be circumspect as to how others might view this ordinary citizens. He needed to be moderate, because you need to keep in mind the kind of challenges people are going through, and he needs to be measured in with whom he's engaging and what he's doing. So I don't think that there is a basis in law or by policy at the moment. I think that a caution, and that caution should not just go to him, but to all of the appointees, that you've transitioned. In your private life, you could do humanitarian stuff, and if it's your own money, after all, he's a lawyer, he could have earned some dollars. But once you're serving the public, you need to be, as I said, circumspect, modest, and measured in what you do.
Now, looking at the grey areas of the Code of Conduct, indeed, rightly as you mentioned, there is no provision in the Code of Conduct in the fine details where he has breached this. But of course, there is the need for circumspection when it comes to how public officers hold themselves and how we hold them accountable. But on that score, does this bring to bear the urgency that perhaps the Code of Conduct in itself is not complete in this current form?
Absolutely. I mean, there are two elements of it. First of all, as an executive policy, I've always been concerned. Executive policy means only the president can sanction. If people don't identify an officer who may have, as it were, infringed on the policy, it doesn't get the president's attention. That person is not held accountable. That's not the best way to go. So in our view, in my view, the Conduct of Public Officers Bill needs to be passed with urgency. And in that document, you have much more comprehensive coverage of issues of ethics, of administration, etc. And even if this is not reflected, it may be a good time, therefore,